This is lesson 3.1, integers and absolute value. So today our learning targets are that you are able to find integers, absolute value. You can use integers to represent real world situations. And then you'll be able to graph integers on a number line, and that you will be able to evaluate simple expressions involving absolute value. So what is an integer? So I want you to write this into your notes. So an integer is any whole number. This is really important, the whole part, that is positive or negative. Okay, so we have to think of whole numbers. So what are some whole numbers to think in your head? Okay, and think of some positive and think of some negative numbers. Okay, so you can look at this number line down below. Those are all integers. So I have a -10, right? I could have a 1. I could have a 3. I could have a -1000, right? Or -11. All right, those are all integers. So you might be wondering if 0 is an integer. 0 is also an integer, okay? So let's go ahead and graph. Well, what does graph mean, first of all? So graph means to plot a number on the number line. So let's go ahead and graph a +3. Well, all that means is I put a point on 3. Let's graph 1. That means I put a point on 1. Let's graph -10. Okay, so there you go right here. And let's graph a -4. That would go right there. That's all that it means to graph on a number line. What is an absolute value? I'd like you to write this in your notes also. So an absolute value is the distance or number of units from 0. So it's the distance from 0 of an integer on a number line. So absolute value is always positive, and it can be written as this with these lines here, these bars. That's the absolute value of 5, or this is the absolute value of -5. Okay, so for example, the absolute value of 5 is 5. Okay, so if you look at your number line, here is 0, here's 5, and here's -5. Okay, so the absolute value of 5, or the distance between 0 and 5, is 5 spaces. Okay, now let's look at the absolute value of -5. So go to -5. What's the distance between 0 and -5? Well, again, it is 5 spaces. Okay, so the distance is 5. So that would be, so the absolute value of -5 is a +5. Now remember, if you go back over here, it's always positive, okay? These little bars right here mean absolute value, okay? So these are absolute value bars, okay? That's kind of like a symbol telling you to take the distance from it. All right. Next one. So absolute value. I'd like you to write these examples down. We're going to circle the number that has the largest absolute value. So that means the farthest away from 0. Okay? So if you're thinking of a number line, here's 0, right? What is the furthest away from 0? You would have -4 would be here, 6 would be here, and -9 would be here. So which one's the furthest from 0? I didn't represent this very well, but this one has 9 spaces. This one only has 6 spaces. Okay, so the distance from -9 is, so the distance is greater here. So the largest absolute value is -9. So on this one, same thing. The distance from 0 on number 2, you have 4, that's 4 spaces away, 6 spaces away, and 9 spaces away. So it would be 9. This next one on number 3, this would be 3 spaces, 8 spaces, 7 spaces away from 0. So which is the largest? It'd be -8 has the largest absolute value. All right, so how do we write the following? So in your guided practice and independent practice, we're going to be having to represent what actually integers mean in the real world. Okay, so it says 17 degrees below 0. If it's below, we're talking negative. Okay, so how you'd represent that is -17. So that means that it's below 0. It's 17 degrees below 0. The rainfall is 12 inches and then above normal. So that would be positive. So you can just write 12. You can write a plus 12 if you want. It doesn't matter. This is positive 12 and that is also positive 12. Okay? Usually when we are writing positives, we don't put the positive in there. Now we're going to evaluate or solve, basically, expressions with absolute value. Okay, so this is example 5 from your book. This is the absolute value of -5 minus the absolute value of 2. All right, so the first step is to evaluate absolute value. Okay, so that means that I need to figure out what is the absolute value of -5. Well, I'm going to draw a number line over here. Here's 0. Here's -5. And remember, absolute value is the distance from 0. Okay, so how many spaces is it from -5 to 0? It's just 5. So my absolute value of -5 is 5. Now I need to figure out the absolute value of 2. So I'm going to put 2 here. What's the distance between 0 and 2? It's just 2. So my absolute value of 2 is 2. And I'm just going to put the subtraction sign here because that's what we're doing. We're just subtracting the absolute values together. So now I have evaluated the absolute value. Now I'm going to go on to step 2, which is the calculations. Now all I do is do 5 minus 2, and that is 3. So this is the end of the asynchronous part. Make sure that you have all of these in your notes. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow.